Greetings, all you sane and rational people in the world, all 11 of you. We're glad to have you as a part of our audience today. I'm Paul Elam with an ear for men, and I'm speaking with Corey Janzen, actually better known as the evil apostate, Mr. Dragonbeard, on the internet. Corey, glad to have you here. Good to be talking to you. How are you today?
I'm good. My voice is a little scratchy, but I'm good.
Oh, that's it. We're scratching it. Yeah, we only take the very best in voices around here, as you can tell by my presence. Listen, I'm cutting up a little bit, but we're here to talk about a really serious matter. And something we talk about a lot in the men's movement. We talk about a lot on An Ear for Men, and that is divorce. This gentleman is going through one and going through the big custody dispute and having one hell of a time. By the way, for those of you who want to catch up on this, this is going to be a minimum of a 4-part series. The first was an interview with Dean Esmay, which just happened recently. A link to that is in the low bar if you want to listen to it. There's also a link, which I'm going to remind you of a couple of times because it's very important. There's a link to a GoFundMe for Corey's legal war chest that he very desperately needs. We're talking about not just pursuit of justice for him, but for his daughter. And why don't we start with that? Could you just recap briefly, at any rate, Corey, exactly what you're going through?
Well, I was married for 4 years. Our daughter, when at the time of separation, was 5. She's 8 now. Has just a little bit of a timeline. And over the years of our marriage, the state of my wife's psychological condition, it changed from being just a little strange to being more and more destructive, to the point where I felt I had to leave the house. And then pursuing that, I wasn't able to see my daughter, and she filed papers on me, and a custody dispute has been where we've been at for the last more than 3 years.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by her behavior becoming more problematic over time? What exactly was going on, to the extent you're able to discuss this in public?
Yeah, well, like usually I'm willing to give a couple of examples. I don't go into all the details, but this is I like to differentiate this from just having disagreements or not being happy with each other, because most people that separate, especially fighting over custody, they'll say some pretty mean things about each other. But in this case, originally, she seemed to be a spiritual person, and I'm sure on some level she still is. But at some point, talking to, for instance, this is the one that seems the most serious to me anyways. When she would talk to angels or spirit guides, eventually these spirit guides and angels would be telling her things like who's talking behind her back. We lived on the 7th floor. They'd be telling her someone's going to come through the window tonight. You need to lock the windows and bar the windows. And then in addition to that, there was a lot of paranoia, being told that she was being pursued by Hell's Angels, Italian mafia, Mormons. And this was all stuff she would act on. It would just come out of her mouth as like a casual reality that we needed to take a different route to Walmart today so that people couldn't follow us.
Okay, and now, folks, it's easy, unfortunately too easy, given the callous nature of the society that we live in, to sort of poke fun at this sort of thing. I'm not going to do that. People who suffer paranoid delusions, auditory hallucinations, things of this matter, this is a really serious illness. And my heart goes out to anybody that's afflicted with that. I can't imagine having to live with that in a day-to-day experience. But I also, having had a lot of experience dealing with family members who've been on the other side of people that are afflicted with the disorders that cause these kind of problems, it can be a living hell. I mean, it sounds one thing like, okay, just take a different route to Walmart. But when you're living under siege, which is what happens when people are guided by voices, everybody around them begins living under siege. And I can imagine, I guess for you, Corey, that grew to be extremely uncomfortable over a period of time.
Well, and remember, I was an over-the-road truck driver at the time, so I'd be gone for 2 weeks at a time, and I'd come back for 1 or maybe 2 days. And so her stress level, her kind of her state of mind in this way would be heightened over that period of time. Yeah, and no matter what I would do, she would try and control her irrational fears by sort of trying to control the people around her. So, for instance, promises. I call it the web of promises. Every single time she was stressed out, she would come to me and make me promise to not say certain things or to not do certain things. And there was just so many over the course of a few years that there's no way to keep track of them, you know?
Yeah, I think it's also important to note here too that there's an element of danger here. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can predict when one of the voices that a person hears tells them to harm somebody, to harm themselves, to harm others, even their own children. And I would suppose as a father that's got to be weighing pretty heavily on your mind right now too.
Yeah. The night that I left, I had already called the police because there was she was hitting me. So I called the police with a state of mind that this would just let her know this is serious and she can't do it. But the police were urging me to press charges, give a statement that she had been hitting me. And they wanted to arrest her, and I protected her. And in addition to that, they came back to me because of the way she was behaving in the other room, which I couldn't see. And they wanted me to at least consider taking my daughter out of the apartment while they were there. And I told them that because of her state of mind, I was worried that if we did either of those things, and then she got my daughter back just for a day, my daughter would be in grave danger. You know, because my wife would have at that point snapped any kind of connection to the rest of the world.
Now, are you worried about any of this going into this process of a custody dispute with her? Is this something that's also weighing on your mind? Because it sort of amounts to the same thing. If you're going for custody, that's going to probably anger her.
The difference here is that she I feel sorry for my daughter. There's only so much I can do to protect her. And that's always on my mind. But at least if we can get the system, I mean, like 3 years is a long time to wait to start a trial. And if we can get this trial started and the decision is made, at least then the system will be aware of the problem. And if they make a decision for me, I'm sure it will be based on this. You know, this is the central issue, and the court has the power of making the decision quickly and safely, involving police escorts, even the same day as the decision comes down.
Now, my understanding is, from my knowledge of this case, is that the court, what would be called an ad litem in the United States, the court-appointed social worker who is there for the interest of the child, has recommended a psychological evaluation for your ex-wife. Has that not happened?
No, it was over 2 years ago, and no judge has made a ruling on it because so far no judge has been sitting on the bench in a position to make that ruling. And this is why the delay is so insane, why it's taken this long.
Can you help me and perhaps the people viewing this understand? I mean, after all, we've got somebody here who, with a history of violence and a history of hallucinations and demonstrating what some people might, and I'm not going to play, the diagnostician here, but some people might consider this a threat from a schizophrenic or somebody with schizophrenic features. Can you explain why that nobody from the court has said, wait a minute, we need to do something sooner than 2 years?
As far as I can tell, it's a combination of bureaucracy and the fear of attacking a mother. They want to be very, very careful how they go about this. The social worker has made a very brazen report on this issue. And as far as I can tell, the reason nobody has, jumped forward on this is because it's being weighted down by a system that doesn't have either enough resources or it's not using them effectively. Because even at the beginning of this, my own lawyer, who's been in the system for decades, never could have predicted 3 years later we'd still be waiting for our first trial date.
Wow, man, that's incredible.
So this, by the way, this is in Ontario. It's where I am.
Yeah, so we have to keep in mind this is Canadian law, and they are actually the family courts are. I mean, there's some amazing parallels between American and Canadian family courts. We see the same problems repeated over and over again, and sometimes in even more extreme cases. I know we did some advocacy work for Lieutenant Colonel Joel Kirk, where the family court judge had the report from the guardian ad litem, from the social worker for the court, pointing to the mother's alcoholism and physical, emotional, and psychological abuse of the children, and the judge still threw it out and gave custody to the mom. Absolutely amazing case. He did end up, after years, getting full custody, but only after his children went through years of living hell before that happened. And
that's exactly what I've been trying to avoid here is my daughter already in kindergarten has been getting suspended for hitting teachers and running around and even screaming uncontrollably. When I have her every other weekend now, I have focused entirely on connecting her to family, connecting her to friends that she sees on an ongoing basis, so that these feelings of fear that everything's dire. Every time someone leaves the room or says, another kid says, I'm not going to play with you, she would flip her wig, because until she was able to see me, she had never met my parents. She had never met most of her family on my side. This is isolation type of stuff, right?
So there again, we see the effects, and this is particularly why I'm broadcasting this from an ear for men instead of a voice for men, even though I'll probably be mirroring it on a voice for men too, because I do want as many people as possible to see this. But the consequences psychologically run downhill like water. They absolutely do. When you have one parent that's mentally disabled, and for lack of a better term, I mean, that's what I'm going to call this for the purpose of this discussion. The consequences from that spread throughout the family. Obviously, it's affected your daughter's well-being, her state of mind, the anxiety level in her sounds like it's very high. Very rough situation. But what about you? What is this like? I mean, again, I hate to sound like a news reporter asking that stupid, what did you feel like question, but I'm going to roll the dice on that anyway, because this is what this boils down to. What is this experience like for you day in and day out?
Well, you've put it all on your own shoulders. I know at one point when I was answering questions for the social worker from the Office of the Children's Lawyer who did the report, I was telling her some of the details, and at one point she couldn't help but just put her pen down, look at me and go, Corey, why didn't you leave her sooner? And the only answer I could give was, I was trying to hold my family together. The perspective you have is I've got to do everything here. And so over the course of that time, there's the stress of the work, which didn't make it any easier, but I gained over 100 pounds. Just from the stress, like something I had to give. I didn't pick up smoking or drugs or any of that stuff. For me, it was weight. And this is, still an ongoing problem. I need to get rid of that weight and the stress. But it'll come out in some way. Whoever goes through this, they'll experience it coming out in some way.
Yeah, we see this a lot. And I've seen this literally hundreds of times. Men in high stress relationships, we start looking at them because I generally saw most of them in the course of treatment for alcoholism and drug abuse. And we started digging into their lives, and over again, we saw abusive, dysfunctional marriages. And I don't doubt what you're saying at all. It seems a bit of an ironic twist, but your sick wife can give you diabetes. and that's not a joke. You gain 100 pounds, you get into pre-diabetic state. There's all kinds of severe consequences from this stuff, and it's easy for a social worker to say, Corey, why didn't you leave earlier? And of course, that's probably something I would have said had I been interviewing you in the process. But it's never quite as simple when you have a child and when you have a family that you're trying to keep intact, to just say, oh, well, I don't like the way she's acting. I think I'm packing everything and leaving today. It's always more difficult than that. But of course, we find out in most cases where the dysfunction is that severe that ultimately leaving turns out to be the only thing that you can do. So I'm glad you got out of it. The question is now, what's needed? And yes, I'm going to be tapping at the fundraiser. There's a GoFundMe link in the low bar to this. I would like to encourage anybody with $1 to spare or $10 or $100 to spare to consider this a good and worthwhile cause, to come to the aid of this man and his daughter and ultimately his ex-wife.
Right. Yeah.
I doubt if anybody in her condition, or at least a condition that the court is assessing that she's in, really needs the stress of raising a child. Go ahead.
If I can just say, this has been my perspective from the beginning. Despite the anger and frustration that anyone would experience going through what I'm going through at times, I want my daughter to have a good relationship with her mother. And the way things are going, that is simply not going to happen. Even if she wins custody, that's going to be a destruction for their future relationship. And even with me trying to help my daughter sort of recover her, her ability to have a happy life, if we can, win this case, there's a chance enough pressure will eventually bring my ex-wife to go to some kind of therapy that she desperately needs to see what the problem is and what can be done about it.
Well, there certainly are medications that can help. There is some therapies that might be of assistance. But if I can throw in my 2 cents worth professionally, the best therapy right now for this man's daughter is to get her out of that environment, to get her into something more stable. Now, it may be a tough question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You're an over-the-road truck driver. I know that life. I've been there, done it for a long time. That is a rough way to raise a child too. Now, how do you plan to work with that with your daughter should you get custody?
It's a good question. Okay, so first I was over the road for quite some time, even after our separation. I arranged with my previous employer to work just during the week under those terms. That lasted for about half a year, and then they can no longer do that. So I switched to another job a year and a half ago, a little more than a year and a half ago, where it's all local work, except for once a week I go over the road to the States for one night.
Okay. So local work means you're home.
And in response, the court decided to charge me at a much higher rate than my actual income is at and destroyed my finances. So,
that's another point that came up with you and Dean in the hangout that you guys did. I want to bring it up too. There's a wonderful term that family courts just love these days. It's called imputed income.
Yeah.
And what they do is, rather than take what you actually make, they decide what you ought to be making or what they think you could be making. And let me tell you, somebody with a number of years, I had to get into really the super dangerous work of heavy hauling oil rigs and things like that in order to make really decent money at truck driving. Most truck drivers don't make a boatload of money, but if I remember your hangout correctly, you make about $35,000 a year, and they imputed your income at $50,000 a year to base your child support on, which of course means you can't possibly pay it. That's another just insane injustice that's going on in the middle of this, aside from the fact that they are withholding a daughter from a healthy parent and basically forcing her to stay with one that's not healthy. They're also impoverishing the healthy parent and threatening him with jail too. How do you keep your spirits up, Corey, during all this?
You have to have friends and family. That's the only way you can do it. The podcast that I do, actually, I should jump back just really quickly. A few years beforehand, when I was a younger man, I went through a few years of depression. And I managed, with the help of the advice of my family doctor and my friends and family being there for me, I worked my way out of that. It was just a major kind of adjustment, coming to adulthood type of thing. But from that experience and remembering what it was like to kind of drift down that dark, I call it a dark river, I decided to keep myself active paddling on the river right away before even the darkness kind of set in. So what I did is I started the podcast as soon as I was single. And it's just to keep myself doing something, even when I feel like just sitting there and doing nothing. So
that's good. Well, and that was the way you and I became acquainted in the first place, when you interviewed myself and Dr. T. That must have been an interesting interview in retrospect.
Yes.
Talking about that book that's behind me, Say Goodbye to Crazy.
Yeah, I've been recommending it to people ever since I had you on the show.
Thank you for that. Gosh, I wish we could have written one that said, "Never say hello to crazy."
Yeah.
Because, going in after the fact is one thing, and it's certainly helpful, but if we could prevent this from happening, and that's admittedly part of why I wanted to be involved in this project, is that I don't just want to help Corey out here, and I really do. I really want people, look, folks, the best activism that I think anybody can do is helping one man at a time. We're fighting a system that is so corrupt that just taking on the system, I mean, that's a century-long process. We're going to be a long, long time trying to straighten out our family courts, trying to straighten out the perception about men and fatherhood. All these things are just so overwhelming, one Mount Everest to climb after another. But we can, and we have, as we did with Bladdock Filler, with Joel Kirk, with Gordon Smith and others, one person at a time, we can get a little slice of justice. We can get a little slice of healing in for a man. We can help his child. We can do things like that, but it requires some action. And yes, it requires money. So with that, I'm going to make pitch number 2. There's a GoFundMe link in the low bar to this video. If you got $1 to spare, will you please pitch it in to help this man and his daughter? All he's trying to do is to get his daughter in a safe place. That's a job here. Money doesn't go to AVFM. It doesn't go to any men's rights organization. It goes directly to attorneys to get this man some protection for his daughter, and perhaps even some justice in the process. And so if you can help out with that, I know that Corey would appreciate it. I certainly will. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I'll make a pledge right now. AVFM will match in the next 4 hours after this is broadcast. Any donations that are made up to $1,000, AVFM will match. Wow. So please give the money. Give it if you don't like me, if you hate A Voice for Men, this is your chance to stick it to us. Go in there and make me cough up the money. Because we're committed to helping this. Let's see. Corey, what is your worst case scenario? If you go in and lose this, what's your next step after that?
If I go in and lose, basically until my daughter becomes old enough to speak for herself at that point, as I understand it, that would be it. This decision would, unless something happens like my ex-wife gets into a fist fight with a police officer, that would pretty much be it for my rights. And let's be clear, when it comes to what the reason we've gotten to this extent is through a process of non-negotiation, basically, where my ex-wife at every turn wants full control of my daughter. I'm not supposed to have any say about her education, her medical situation, or any input, just weekends, like a fun uncle, basically. And that's where I'll be stuck. I'll be the fun uncle father until my daughter gets old enough. And when she's old enough, I'm sure my daughter will start kicking up a fuss on her own. But by then, she'll have gone through years of unnecessary turmoil and difficulty just developing as a normal person.
Oh man, you got to love our family courts.
And don't forget,
Well,
I might also end up in prison from the amount that they're demanding that I pay. So hopefully, a judge will at least um, consider the fact that the amount that they're asking is unreasonable, and throwing me in prison is no good. But I could
well,
end up in
and
prison.
hopefully that they'll realize that if you can get some traction going on getting the psychological evaluation done and on getting your case actually heard, they might realize that throwing the one fit, healthy parent in
Right.
jail isn't the best course of action. Now, I never put anything past a family court because they are known for just some absolutely batshit crazy rulings. But I also know that sometimes they do make some really good rulings. So
Yeah.
there's a possibility of that there. And I want to be clear about this too. Now, as I understand it, your attorney feels good about your chances if you can get
Yes.
this case heard, correct?
Yep, he does. And he's been very honest with me every step of the way when he thinks we have good chances or bad chances. And he has been in the courts for decades. He used to be a family court judge for a number of years himself. So he has a good feeling for basically what's likely that a judge will pay attention to or ignore. And he thinks we have a good chance.
Well, and he also has some real good experience on how to argue these cases in front of
Right.
people that do what he used to do. So that's encouraging. Well, let me ask you, Corey, is there anything else that you want to add to this before we sign off? We're committed to making these short interviews. I want you to know that he will be coming up very soon. I forget, what day is it that you're interviewing with Mykeru Media?
It'll be this Sunday, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
This Sunday, if you are subscribed to Mykeru Media's channel, and you should be, uh, um, you will be able to catch another one. Plus, we will also certainly be posting that interview to A Voice for Men.
Yeah.
Dean Esmay's link is in the low bar. We'll be posting this one to A Voice for Men today, and we will be posting the interview with Mykeru Media, and the one followed up by that from Hannah Wallen of the HoneyBadgers will also be interviewing Corey in relation to this case. And hopefully, between all of us and between you people who watch this and are concerned about these problems, we'll pitch in and help this man get the legal representation that he so obviously needs for him and for his young daughter. Corey, anything you would like to add before we sign off?
Just to quickly add, it's expected to be at 6 p.m. this Sunday, the one with Mykeru. That's the time we've set. And if I was going to say anything to anyone out there, the thing that I think most of us can focus on to help start alleviating a lot of what's going on that's wrong in family court is to support your local legislation for shared custody. It's where we start off with a shared custody issue instead of assuming one parent gets initial full custody. I think that those types of legislation mean a lot for solving a lot of these problems for families.
They absolutely do. Shared parenting is the way to go. It eliminates or can eliminate anyway a lot of issues surrounding child support, a lot of issues around incarcerating parents for being poor after a divorce, which is, to me, one of the most insane situations we could possibly imagine, that you break a family up. The idea to me of family court should be, of course, we live in a world of should be's, but it should be not to destroy a family, but to help it restructure in a way that actually is in the best interest of the children. That's what
Right.
courts love to say that they do all the time. They act in the best interest of the children. Only nowadays, the best interest of the children is lock up the father and give the mother all the property, regardless of her state of fitness to be a parent. That is in the best interest of destroying children, and it does all the time. This is such a case where we see that happening in front of us. Fortunately, in this case, if we can get people to contribute and pitch into this man's legal defense, we can do something about it. And with that, I will ask you all to pitch in. Look forward to your interview with Mykeru, 6 p.m. Sunday, and followed up by another interview with Hannah Wallen. And with that, we'll say good day to everybody and see you next time.